Eddie Troxler here, back with another episode of jazzchat.org. Once again, flying solo today. So anytime you want to be a guest on my show, just contact me. There's contact info there. You can call me at Eddy's Music in Fitchburg as well. So I have, I'll just pull up, a couple of public domain songs. Also, if you have suggestions for format, I pretty much what I've been doing is choosing some public domain pieces and play through them, or originals. I'll bring in some originals too, and just kind of talk about it a bit, how I approach it. Because for me, as I've mentioned before, I've studied a lot of different methods and seen a lot of stuff online. But for me, learning to build these chords myself, and they differ every time. When you play guitar, you don't want your keys in your pocket. So once I learned to put them together. So I have this blues piece here, St. Louis Blues. Let me pull it up. So it's it is a 12-bar blues, but it has this other part that's kind of it goes into a minor. In the real book, it's just a G major. Some people don't even do that part. So that would be the Latin part, and that's a minor blues. 2 bars of the G minor, then it goes to a D7. And what I'm doing there with those, that's like that, plain old cowboy C7, but I move it up to the 3rd fret, which and that gives me that bass line. If it generally Latin music or country music too, you get that root fifth. So it's 2 bars of G minor, 2 bars of D7, and actually 2 more bars of D7, and back to the G minor. That's like, you could use that as the intro, or sometimes people do the other part first, and then they go into that part. And just listen to some different versions. It's originally W.C. Handy, I think maybe as early as 24, 25, I'm not sure, but it is well within the public domain realm. And then the next part is just a 12-bar blues. And then the melody, it kind of, if I were switching part, so the Latin part, and you would, G minor would be really the key of B flat. And then when you switch to the other part, it's, G major. So most people, if it's a Latin, you don't swing that part. There's quite a few jazz standards that we do that they're partially Latin, partially swing. You go back and forth. Green Dolphin Street comes to mind. On Green Dolphin Street, most people do that as well. Or a Night in Tunisia goes back and forth, swing to Latin, and this one does too. So that the other part, the blues part, I have a G7, and then in blues, sometimes we call it a quick 4. When you go to the 4 chord in the 2nd bar, then you go back to the 1. Then the 4 chord for the 5th and 6th measure, which in this case is a C7, and I'm doing a C9. If that, I have notes to myself to look at the camera, because if you watch my past videos, I hardly ever look at it. So that C9 instead of that C7, just because if I'm like, that's my, this is, this shape is the one most people learn from books or whatever, or you probably know that G7, but that when you first start learning bar chords, that would be that G7. But what I'm doing is playing just that note, that note, that note out of that chord. And I know that there's certain licks I could throw in with that, When I hit that C9 instead of that C7, I'm adding that D, which makes it a ninth. And most of the time, in most cases, you can substitute nines for sevens. Not it maybe sometime the melody might clash, but or if it does, you can just, it just adds a little bit more color. I think in blues especially, we kind of go for that tension and then resolve it, that. All right, so moving on, we go back to G, then our turnaround D7 to G. And then I hit that 5 chord in the last bar to make to go back to the G. So that 12 bar blues in G, I'm going. So there's a couple of things I can do there. I could put in a bass line with it. If I'm doing this solo, maybe I can't. It's hard to do the melody and bass and all at the same time. But if I wanted to put a bass line, that's a typical, like a walking blues line. So what I do there, I play that shape for that G dominant 7. I have this G, and I have this F, which makes it a 7, and then I have this B. So, and that's really all I need. It's still a G7. I'm just don't really have my So I have my 7th, and I have my 3rd. I just don't really have a 5th on that. So, but you don't really need it in this case. So I can do that. So that's one measure right there. Now this is an arpeggio. That's the G, the B, the D. Then I go down a half step, which you could call that a D flat or C sharp. And that's going to lead me into that C for the second measure, And then that C, that C9 or C7, I might just hit those 3. And then I can hit the E and walk back up to the G. So I'm doing an open E and just chromatically up. And really the main thing is that your beats come out, because I want to land on that G on the first beat of the next measure. So with the bass line, so right. And now we're going back to the 4 chord. I have a whole measure to, I could go right to it there, but I could also walk it up this way, which is pretty common too. And then I'm up here with my C. So there's my C, and I can do my arpeggio right there, and then walk back down. instead of just, going to the 5, I'm going to do what they call a 2-5, which is A minor, D7 back to G. So here's that bass line without anything, just bass. Now, if I want to put my chords in there with it, I'm going to do it on a kind of a different part of the beat. The 2-5. And create your own stuff too. That's just my version. And then when we start putting it in, you could use that, most anywhere. I've said before, chord progressions aren't copywritten, and we all, borrow from everybody else. I think I first started learning ninth chords. I used to go watch this blues guy down where I grew up in Greensboro. That he was really good. He had you may know Bob Margolin. He had played for Muddy when he was like young, but he was older, and he would play down at this place in my hometown of Greensboro. And I would watch him play, and he was always using these ninth chords. So I'll go home and try them. And so yeah, ninth is an important chord. You can also have a sharp 9, which you would just add your little finger. So that's, right here, like C, that's a C7, C9. And then if I wanted to make it a sharp 9, I would put that little finger there on that D sharp. Also, you could have a flat 9. So what I would do for a flat 9, to add a D flat as I flatten my first finger. Some people call that sharp 9. They call it the Jimi Hendrix chord. He used it in the Foxy Lady or Purple Haze too. Well, I'm not supposed to play stuff that's copywritten, but you can play 8 bars of it. So, but yeah, some people call that the Jimi Hendrix chord, and Stevie Ray would use that a lot too. So it gives it kind of a little more pull. It kind of I guess, you get used to hearing it, but it kind of doesn't make a lot of sense in classical music theory, because you have a major third, you have so it's a major chord first, and then it's a 7th, and then it's a sharp 9. But a sharp 9 would be the same as a minor third, on there. So you have a major and a minor on the same chord, if that makes sense. Yeah. But if you haven't studied it, if it's confusing, feel free to contact me. Always, I'll help you, and I can do some online lessons if you're remote, if you're somewhere besides local, and always a free intro lesson, either online or in my shop. And if you're at Fitchburg State, you can sign up for my classes too. All right, so St. Louis Blues. That melody is pretty simple once you get into the. Once you get out of the Latin part, or if, like I say, listen to some versions, because some people do the other part first, and then they go into the Latin. But that's it, and the lyrics, I hate to see that evening sun go down. Like I said in another one, I'm not a singer, but it helps me a lot to know where I'm at in the song, or to kind of phrase it more as a vocalist would, to hopefully convey some sort of emotion, if that makes sense. Because just playing the notes, it's just easy. I mean, that would be straight. That doesn't really get it right. You gotta make it groove. That's what I tell, I think music in general, you want to find this groove. Your average audience doesn't want to they don't necessarily want to hear how much of a virtuoso you are. They want to lock into this groove, So that's kind of what. Even if you miss notes, to still hang in that groove, So get used to that. Playing with the metronome or playing with. I've talked about before. I use band in a box here, so I'll bring up this tune in a second. So that's a pretty simple lick. The first part is basically an arpeggio. You're going B, D, B, G, That's the first line. Then when you're on the C7, you have this D sharp, but that's really just an approach note. And that's, it's a typical blues sound too. That's what we play on that. And then when you get to that note, you're back on the G chord. And then when you're on the C chord, you go. It says to, but I would add a few more little nuances, for lack of a better word. I might would do so. The next line they go up to the B flat. And then you're on the F sharp. So that's that whole part. That's kind of the verse, which it repeats a few times. There's another part too. I guess some people, like I say, some people don't even play the Latin part. But there's that other melody. As far as the real book, this is that version. There's Feeling Tomorrow. I think it's. If I have a rhythm section, I would do all that up an octave. You know what I mean? Because it really cuts through a lot better up there. If you have like all of this mid-range, you have piano, bass, drums. Maybe put that melody up an octave. And really, that's when you're practicing it a few different places. Because. Then change the key of it, but a lot of times, you really want to switch back and forth sometimes. And then back to the Latin part probably. Let me pull it up in the band in a box, and I'll go over it as if I had a rhythm section. You could play this solo too, especially if you're a good singer, but probably sound better with a band. I think it was actually written for a play or a movie, one called St. Louis Blues. One second, and I'll get it up. All right, so the what I have programmed in here, and I've talked about this before, band in a box. It's PG Music. I'm sure you can probably get a free demo version, but I've used it for years. It works really good, and this stuff is really advanced. And when I first started using it in the 90s, it was only like MIDI files, which is good for practice, but you wouldn't want to use it. But now it's actually audio files, which is live musicians, and it sounds pretty good. Well, you be the judge. It might not. All right, St. Louis Blues. I'm pretty sure that is from the. Sorry, I'm hearing a fan. I thought it was feedback. I'm pretty sure there's a play with the same name, and maybe a movie too. But I guess they had black and white, films. I think they had talking films by the time. But yeah, it's a good tune, and it's public domain, so you can use it wherever you want. So that, and like I said, if you have questions, feel free to look me up on that. Just a little bit. Yeah, I played kind of through the melody down here, and then I soloed a little bit over it. Blues is a little different from, say, soloing over, where it's pretty much there. If I was doing that, that would be called a 1-6-2-5. Do, la, re, sol, do, la. I would pretty much just stay in C major. Blues, even though it's a major, so a lot of times they'll throw in a minor on top of it. You can put the major pentatonic on top of it, which I was kind of switching back and forth. The major pentatonic almost sounds like country, and the relative minor of G is E minor, so I could do just do that one most people learn in the beginning, or do it up here, but it sounds like Whereas if I hit that minor third, which they do in that melody a lot, even the second, they go. Then when they go to, that's that minor third, on the G, which is the flat 7 on the C. And with this, you just got to use your ear and listen to a lot of different stuff. A lot of the early rock and roll, even though they were doing, major chords like, Chuck Berry and stuff like that, even Rolling Stones, but they were, because that minor, even a lot of the Elvis stuff, like like a Hound Dog or something, they'll switch back and forth. There were some great guitarists back then. A lot of them were the session players of the time. So people like Elvis would hire the Nashville guys or Memphis and whoever was doing the sessions, and they were really great players. But they were pretty much inventing that style for us to talk about later, I suppose. But I'm sure there were people who critiqued it for better or for worse. But now that's kind of what our ear wants to hear, I think. That tension to resolution. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'm nearing the last 30 seconds of my my counter here. It says I'm at 29 minutes 42 seconds. So I'll be back next week. Hopefully I'll have a guest. If you want to be a guest, just give me a shout. Eddy's Music, or check us out, jazzchat.org. Thank you.